The wind howled across the Colorado ridgeline, flinging snow sideways against the weathered sign of the North Star Lodge. The wooden plaque swung on rusted hinges, its carved star barely visible beneath layers of fresh powder. Inside, Jack Sullivan stood alone behind the counter, his sleeves rolled to his elbows despite the chill. A single lamp cast long shadows across the empty room. Jack pulled a small cash box from beneath the bar and tipped its contents onto the scarred oak surface. Bills fluttered like exhausted birds, 2 20s, a 10-3 crumpled ones, and a scatter of coins. He counted twice, though the result wouldn't change. $63. The meager sum seemed to mock him in the dim light. Next to the cash sat a white envelope bearing the bank's insignia in cold blue print. Jack unfolded the notice again, though he'd memorized every word. Final notice of foreclosure. Amount due $18,000. Deadline 10 days. 10 days until a stranger with a clipboard would come to lock the doors of North Star Lodge, the business he'd built from his Marine savings and sweat. From the back hallway came soft, even breathing. 8-year-old Lily slept curled under the quilt Jack's late wife had sewn, the one patterned with tiny stars that had faded with each washing. He pictured her tumble of chestnut curls against the pillow, and for a moment the tightness in his chest loosened. She couldn't know, not tonight. Maybe not ever, if he could find a miracle. Jack set the envelope aside and reached for a rag to polish the bar top, though it was already clean. The motion calmed him, slow circles over scarred oak, the smell of lemon oil mingling with wood smoke. The North Star had been his gamble after coming home from his second tour, a place for travelers and hunters, built on the promise that even in these mountains, people needed somewhere to gather. For a while, summer tourists and autumn hunting parties had kept it alive. But winters were merciless, and last October's freak storm had scared off the final wave of guests, damaging the roof and draining his repairs budget. The blizzard outside growled louder, rattling windows in their frames. Jack checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. Too late for customers, too early for surrender. His phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Madison Developers development manager. The company had been circling his property for months, eager to acquire the strategic mountainside location for their luxury resort plans. Just checking in on your decision, Jack. Our offer stands until your deadline. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. Jack's jaw tightened. He'd sooner burn the North Star to the ground than sell to those vultures. The lodge wasn't just timber and nails. It was his promise to Emily that he'd build something permanent after years of deployment, a legacy for Lily when cancer took her mother 3 years ago. His phone buzzed again. Remember, foreclosure records are public. Your reputation in town matters. Jack powered off the phone, his throat tight with frustration. Beyond being his livelihood, the North Star supplemented its income by providing meals to road crews and power line workers through winter contracts. Those steady arrangements had helped keep them afloat until the medical bills from Emily's treatment created a hole too deep to climb out of. Now the vultures were circling, waiting for him to fail. As long as I'm breathing, the North Star will never belong to them. Jack thought, his resolve hardening like the ice outside. He stepped to the front window, pushing aside the heavy curtain. Nothing but white chaos met his gaze. The mountain road beyond had vanished under snowdrifts. No one would drive up here tonight. The sudden sound froze him in place. At first he thought it was the wind shifting ice off the roof, but the rhythm was wrong. A deep mechanical rumble cutting through the storm's howl. Jack strained to listen, his military instincts cataloging possibilities. Snowplow logging truck. But the sound grew clearer. Engines in perfect unison. Motorcycles in a blizzard. At midnight, beyond the swirling snow, faint amber glows pulsed low and steady. His mind raced. Nobody rode in conditions like this, unless they had a death wish or no choice. The glow sharpened into beams of light, cutting through the whiteout. 1, 2, 5. At least 20 headlamps formed a constellation of moving stars, each haloed by snow. Jack's pulse quickened. His first instinct was pure Marine training, assess secure. He checked the shotgun under the bar, not to use, just to know it was there. Lily's breathing remained steady in the back room. He'd keep it that way. Through the frosted glass silhouettes emerged riders dismounting, their thick jackets, dusted white helmets tucked under arms. At their center, a figure strode forward with unmistakable authority, long black coat whipping in the gale. Even at a distance, Jack caught the flash of silver rings on gloved hands and the confident lift of her chin. The door handle rattled. Then a woman's voice, steady and commanding, cut through the storm. Is anyone inside? We need shelter. 20 of us. Roads closed behind. Jack exhaled slowly, his breath clouding in the cold air. 20 strangers. 20 variables. On a night when the world had already taken everything but his last $63 and his sleeping daughter. A choice waited on the threshold: fear or trust, retreat, or the stubborn kind of hospitality that had once defined the North Star. The blizzard didn't wait for his decision. It surged through the doorway. As soon as Jack turned the lock, a fist of icy air that clawed across the room. The lantern above the entrance swung violently on its chain, casting erratic bands of amber light over the snow-choked parking lot. Beyond, 20 motorcycles stood like iron sentinels, their headlamps cutting narrow tunnels through the storm. Engines throbbed in a low, unified rhythm that Jack felt in his chest, reminiscent of distant artillery. This wasn't a random group of thrill-seekers. This was an organized convoy. A tall woman with commanding posture unbuckled her helmet and shook free a mane of dark hair. Her sharp gray eyes, almost silver in the flickering light, locked onto him. I'm Alexandra Blackwood, Silver Wings. We just rode from Utah. Roads behind us are sealed with ice. We need shelter, warmth, food, anything, please. The name stirred a faint recollection. Silver Wings, a renowned all-female motorcycle collective that raised funds for women's shelters and veterans' causes. Still, reputation was one thing. Survival in a Colorado blizzard was another. Behind Alexander, the rest of the riders dismounted in practiced silence. Their boots crunched over ice-black leather vests marked with silver insignias, a winged helmet, and the words, "Ride free, stand strong." Jack's mind worked through military training. Assess, secure, adapt. 20 strangers meant limited supplies stretched thin. 2 days of canned goods at best, a dwindling bag of coffee, and Lily sleeping soundly in the back. But something steadied within him, perhaps the discipline drilled into his bones, or the memory of fellow Marines offering rations to desert villages. Maybe it was the way Alexandra's plea cut through the storm with urgency, but without panic. Come in, Jack said, voice deep enough to carry over the wind. But kill the engines. Carbon monoxide's no friend tonight. A ripple of relief passed through the group. Alexandra turned, issuing quick, decisive hand signals. One by one, the bikers wheeled their machines under the eaves, covering them with tarps and tying knots, with practiced efficiency despite numbed fingers. Then, like a migrating flock, they filed toward the entrance. The moment they crossed the threshold, the North Star transformed. Warmth and the scent of pine sap greeted them, but so did an almost sacred hush. Snowflakes melted instantly on leather jackets, dotting the wooden floor with silver specks. Jack bolted the door against the gale. Hang your gear near the stove, he instructed. Boots on the mat. Keep the floor dry if you can. Alexandra's glance swept the room, the scarred oak bar, the dim neon beer signs from another decade, the solitary Christmas wreath Lily had hung on a window pane. Nice place, she said, her voice lower now, but still edged with authority. It was once Jack replied, the words more honest than he'd intended. The bikers fanned out, shaking off snow and stamping warmth into their toes. Their vests bore embroidered names: Maria Schuyler, Jen Terra, each telling a story Jack couldn't yet read. Some women looked barely 30. Others carried the seasoned calm of riders who'd seen 1,000 highways. Tattoos traced their arms and necks like topographical maps of lives he knew nothing about. Lily's soft footsteps startled him. She appeared in the hallway doorway, quilt draped around her shoulders, eyes wide at the sight of so many strangers. Jack crouched beside her. It's okay, sweetheart. These ladies got caught in the storm. They just need a safe place tonight. A silver-haired biker with kind eyes and a Celtic knot tattoo knelt to Lily's height. Hi there, little one. I'm Maria. We don't bite, promise. Lily's nervous glance shifted to her father. At his nod, she gave a small wave, and the tension in the room softened just enough for Jack to notice. Alexandra removed her gloves and extended a firm, calloused hand. Thank you. We'll pay for every crumb we eat, every drop we drink. Name your price. Jack shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip and a faint scar along her knuckles. Prices: stay warm, stay respectful. We'll figure the rest later. A murmur of appreciation passed among the riders. Jack moved behind the bar, mentally inventorying supplies. I've got chili fixings, some beans, bread. Coffee, though it's rationed. Beans and bread sound like a feast, someone said, earning a round of appreciative chuckles that brightened the room further. Within minutes, the North Star transformed from a deserted outpost into a bustling refuge. Jackets hung heavy on hooks, boots steamed near the stove, the air filled with the metallic scent of thawing leather and the earthy aroma of chili simmering on the old iron range. Alexandra settled at a corner table, eyes never fully leaving Jack. She spoke in low tones to Maria, who nodded toward the bank envelope Jack had left on the counter without realizing it. He quickly tucked it under the ledger, but Alexandra had already noticed. "You running this place alone?" she asked when he returned with mugs of steaming coffee. "Mostly. My daughter helps when she can." "That's a lot on one man," Alexandra said not unkindly. Jack met her gaze for a long beat, the storm outside hammering the walls. He wasn't ready to share the rest of the debt, the 10-day deadline. But something in her look made him suspect she'd already read more than he'd spoken. As the night deepened, snow battered the windows in relentless sheets. Yet inside, warmth thickened like a second skin. Laughter sparked here and there as the bikers swapped road stories. Lily, now fully awake and curious, perched on a stool, watching Jack ladle chili into bowls. Every so often, she whispered questions about tattoos or bikes, which the women answered with patience and smiles. Jack felt an odd sensation, a fragile peace, as though the storm had pushed an unexpected family onto his doorstep. He moved among the tables with quiet efficiency, refilling mugs, adding logs to the fire. Each action, simple and necessary, felt like a small stand against despair. Near midnight, when the last bowls were scraped clean and the wood stove glowed like a captured sun, Alexandra caught his eye again. There was curiosity there, but also a glint of something he recognized from long ago patrols, respect for a fellow soldier, even if she didn't yet know the details. Jack didn't know that this night, with 20 strangers and a blizzard sealing them in, was only the beginning of something far larger than a rescue from the cold. As dawn's first pale light filtered through frosted windows, the North Star Lodge no longer felt like the solitary outpost Jack Sullivan had locked up hours earlier. It had become a small, living world. Tables were pushed together to form long communal benches. Riders in jackets embroidered with silver wings served coffee and passed baskets of bread that Maria had somehow produced from their limited supplies. Jack stood behind the bar, wiping down a cutting board, his marine senses awake to every detail: the soft creak of old floorboards under biker boots, the faint metallic clink when someone adjusted a belt buckle, the sudden hush when the wind outside dropped low enough to hear the crackle of the stove. 20 riders, 20 wild cards. Their presence pressed against him like the blizzard itself, testing his resolve. Alexandra Blackwood, still wearing her leather jacket, now flecked with melted snow, leaned one hip against a corner table. Morning light caught in her dark hair, throwing silver highlights that matched her eyes. Those eyes never stopped moving, assessing exits, cataloging resources, reading the room with practiced precision. When she finally spoke, her voice carried like a command across the room. "Your stockroom. It's small. How long will supplies last?" Jack measured his words. 2 days if we stretch it, maybe 3. Alexandra nodded once as though she'd expected the answer. "Then we'll ration. We've lived lean before." A ripple of agreement moved through the group, nods, soft hums of assent. They trusted her. That much was clear. Still, Jack's fingers hovered near the phone on the back counter. He wasn't sure if the storm had killed the line. He wasn't sure whether calling for help would be wise or wasteful. What exactly would he say 20 iron-willed bikers had decided to turn his mountain bar into a temporary fortress? One of the younger riders, a freckled woman with a streak of electric blue in her hair, broke the quiet. "Boss, I could check the main road, see how bad it is," she offered, voice tinged with the eagerness of someone who preferred action to sitting still. Alexandra's eyes flashed. No one rides blind in a whiteout. The rider exhaled but obeyed. Discipline rippled outward again. Jack took the moment to step forward. "There's a generator out back. Old, but it'll keep the stove and a few lights if the power cuts. We'll need to clear the exhaust pipe before it ices shut. I'll handle it when the wind drops." "I'll come with you," Alexandra said immediately. Something in her tone left no room for polite refusal. Jack gave a short nod. "Suit up in 10. I'll gather tools." The other bikers exchanged glances but said nothing. Respect for their leader and maybe curiosity about this quiet ex-Marine kept them still. In the side room where the generator squatted under a sheet of rime, the storm hit like a living thing. Snow pelted their backs in wet, hard slaps. Jack crouched by the exhaust pipe chipping away ice, while Alexandra braced herself against the wall and scanned the tree line with the vigilance of someone accustomed to watching horizons. "You've done this before," she said over the howl of wind. Jack kept his focus on the wrench. "I've kept things alive in worse places. Military used to be." Alexandra tilted her head, sharp eyes narrowing. "Marine." Jack tightened the bolt until it squealed. "Something like that." Alexandra studied him a moment longer, but didn't press. "My father served in the Corps," she said finally. "Did 2 tours. Never came home from the second." The wind seemed to hold its breath. Jack met her gaze, the shared understanding, wordless and heavy. Then he gave a single nod. Respect between strangers who recognized the weight each carried. By the time they returned inside, a faint camaraderie had grown between them, quiet but unmistakable. Back in the bar, the atmosphere had shifted. With the generator humming and coffee reheating, the riders had rearranged furniture into a loose horseshoe around the stove. Lily sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, listening raptly as Maria spun stories of desert highways and meteor showers in Arizona. When Jack entered, every head turned slightly, as if gauging the man who had allowed them a measure of safety and warmth. It was Maria who broke the spell. "You run a fine ship, Captain," she said, lifting her mug in salute. Jack gave a small smile. Just a bar, trying to stay open. But the words tasted thin. The foreclosure letter in his pocket felt heavier than the wrench he'd carried. Alexandra returned to her corner seat and motioned for him to join her. He approached warily. "You didn't have to let us in," she said quietly. Most people would have bolted the door. Jack shrugged with a Marine's economy of movement. Leaving people out in that storm wasn't an option. Alexandra studied him for a long moment. "Not everyone thinks that way." Her words hung between them like a subtle challenge. Jack felt something stir, a faint tug he hadn't allowed himself in years, part respect, part curiosity. As the day wore on, the blizzard pressed harder against the old building. Wind moaned through the eaves. Snow stacked like fortress walls outside. The riders took turns feeding logs to the stove, their conversation ebbing and flowing in pockets of laughter and contemplative silence. Jack moved from table to table with calm efficiency that reminded Alexandra of a field medic keeping soldiers steady during a siege. Every action seemed deliberate, refilling mugs before they emptied, checking windows for leaks, adjusting the damper on the stove. Yet beneath the rhythm lay an undercurrent, the standoff of strangers forced into trust. No one said it aloud, but each understood they were bound together by weather and circumstance, their fates intertwined until the mountain released them. Near evening, Lily wandered to Jack with a sketch pad showing a drawing of the roaring bikes outside. He crouched beside her, pride softening his stern features. "That's beautiful, honey. Your mom would have loved it." A ripple of warmth spread through the room. Maria grinned. Kids got an eye for detail. Even Alexander's cool expression thawed for a heartbeat. By nightfall, the North Star felt less like a bar and more like a makeshift community. Still, Jack couldn't shake the sense of a line quietly drawn guests and host 20-1. Trust had begun to flicker, but it wasn't yet aflame. When the wind finally eased to a steady moan, Jack stepped to the door and peered outside. The world was an endless white ocean. No plows, no lights, only the silent presence of 20 powerful bikes lined like dark sculptures under thickening snow. Alexandra joined him, her breath a soft cloud. "Looks like we're here for the long haul." Jack's jaw tightened. "Then we make it work." For the first time since the riders arrived, she smiled, small, measured, but real. "You've got grit, Marine." The word landed like a quiet revelation. Jack didn't answer, but deep inside something long dormant stirred a reminder of the man who had once led men through desert storms and come home with more scars than medals. The North Star was still on the edge of foreclosure. The blizzard still roared in distant valleys. Yet as the door closed against the night, Jack sensed a shift in the air, not just survival, but the beginning of a story no storm could bury. By the time the storm settled into a slow, steady hush, the North Star had changed from a stranger's refuge into something more intimate. The scent of wood smoke clung to every beam. Frosted windows wore thick coats of white. In the soft orange glow of the stove, 20 riders' women hardened by highways sat in comfortable silence. Jack moved among them with a calm that belied his sleepless night, carrying a tray of steaming mugs, his voice low and steady when he asked if anyone needed more coffee. The quiet strength of a Marine still lived in his movements, precise, economical, and strangely comforting. Most of the women noticed. Alexandra certainly did. She sat near the corner with her elbows on the table, gray eyes following the man who'd opened his door and shared his scarce supplies without a single demand. When he placed a fresh log in the stove, the sparks leapt like small, joyful spirits. The fire crackled, painting his worn flannel shirt with flashes of copper. For a moment, even the wind outside seemed to pause. "Breakfast," Jack announced, "simply such as it is." He set down bowls of chili and beans, last night's ingredients stretched with the last hidden cans from his stockroom. He added a loaf of bread he'd baked days ago, now warmed and crisped in the oven. One of the bikers, a wiry woman called Tara, tilted her head. "You sure about feeding 20 people with your pantry?" "That's got to be the last of it." Jack poured another mug of coffee. "Eat first. I'll worry about the rest." The room fell into an almost reverent silence as spoons scraped bowls and the warmth of food began to settle into cold, stiffened limbs. The humble feast, beans, bread, coffee, tasted better than any diner meal they could recall. Lily wandered in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her hair tumbled in coppery curls, and the sight of so many leather-clad strangers might have sent another child running, but Lily simply blinked, then smiled shyly. "Morning, sweetheart," Jack said, his tone softening. "These are our guests. Ladies, this is Lily." A chorus of greetings rose soft, "Hey there's," and warm good mornings. Maria offered Lily a seat and half of her bread. Lily climbed onto a stool beside her father and looked around with wide-eyed curiosity. "Did you all ride through the storm?" she asked. "Sure did," Maria answered with a grin. "Silver wings don't scare easy." Lily giggled and the sound lightened something heavy in the room. Alexandra watched the exchange, her mind working. She had met plenty of men who wore toughness like armor, but Jack's steadiness was different. He didn't perform strength, he embodied it. There was no swagger, no attempt to impress, only quiet action, feeding, fixing, making sure every stranger was warm. After breakfast, Jack began tending to chores without prompting. He wiped tables, refilled the wood bin, and even mended a loose latch on the front door with a pocket tool. Each task seemed to carry its own silent message: "I will take care of what's in front of me." Alexandra rose to help, but he waved her off with a small, polite shake of his head. "Guests sit, guests help," she countered, but his half-smile disarmed any argument. Near midday, the storm outside slowed to a gentle drift. Through the fogged glass, the bikes sat buried under soft mounds of snow, like sleeping beasts. Inside, time stretched easy. The women traded road stories, wild desert nights and Arizona music festivals in Texas, dawn rides along Oregon cliffs. Lily listened as though each tale was a bedtime story, her eyes bright with wonder. When Jack finally sat down with his own plate of reheated beans, Alexandra joined him. "You don't talk much about yourself," she said, stirring her coffee. "Not much to tell." Her brow arched. "I doubt that." He took a slow sip, buying time. "Served a while, got out, opened this place, tried to raise my daughter, right?" That all? Jack's gaze rested on Lily now, drawing with a stub of pencil one of the Silver Wings bikes. "That's all that matters?" Something softened in Alexandra's face. She thought of her own father, a Marine who'd written letters from overseas in the same spare sentences. She wanted to ask more, but she sensed the line he had drawn and respected it for now. As the day lengthened, small acts of generosity multiplied. Maria taught Lily how to fold paper into tiny motorcycles. Tara and Skylar shoveled a path around the generator shed to keep the vents clear. Someone found a deck of cards, and laughter rose from a corner table like warmth itself. Jack joined them only to refill mugs or adjust the stove. Yet his presence anchored the room like a steady bass note under a melody. The North Star, which only hours ago had felt like a fortress against debt and isolation, now pulsed with unexpected life. Still, in quiet moments, worry returned. The foreclosure letter lay hidden under the ledger, its numbers, $18,000 in 10 days, burning like an ember he couldn't stamp out. Each kindness he offered, every extra log, every second helping chip at dwindling supplies. But he would not turn away anyone who needed warmth. Alexandra seemed to sense this, catching him alone by the stove. "You keep giving like a man who thinks he'll never run out. That's rare." Jack met her gaze. "Running out doesn't excuse doing less." The simplicity of the answer startled her. For a long beat, she only watched him, the orange light throwing a quiet halo around his worn flannel shirt and the faint scars on his forearms. Outside, the storm began to pick up again, a low, steady drum against the windows. But inside, the North Star Trust was beginning to root in shared meals and unspoken gratitude, in the quiet leadership of a man who asked for nothing in return. As evening fell, Lily presented a handful of small sketches she'd made during the day, tiny portraits of each biker captured with surprising accuracy. One by one, she offered them to the women. "This is for you," she said shyly to Maria. "So you remember today." Maria swallowed hard and hugged the drawing as if it were treasure. The room fell silent, many blinking away sudden moisture from their eyes. Jack stood in the doorway, heart full and aching. He had worried about the last $63 and the debt he couldn't escape. Yet here was his daughter giving away the only wealth that mattered, her innocent generosity, and in doing so knitting strangers into something like family. Alexandra caught his eye across the room and gave a small nod. No words passed, but Jack understood the first real bridge of trust had been built. The wind could rage all it wanted, for tonight kindness was the strongest thing on the mountain. By the second morning of the storm, the North Star felt less like a chance refuge and more like a hidden world suspended in white. Snow still fell in thick curtains, softening every edge of the surrounding pines. Inside, the wood stove hummed, and the air smelled of coffee, leather, and faint pine smoke. The bikers spoke in low, unhurried voices, their laughter an occasional spark in the muffled calm. But Alexandra's mind refused to settle. She sat at the corner table with her boots propped on the rung of a chair, nursing a mug of black coffee. Her gray eyes sharp as winter light on steel tracked Jack Sullivan as he moved through the bar. He was as steady as he had been the night they arrived, brewing coffee, patching a draft in the back door, lifting heavy logs with quiet efficiency that carried a soldier's precision. Every small movement told a story. Alexandra had grown up among Marines. She knew the language of discipline when she saw it, the way he kept his back to the wall, the habit of scanning windows before settling into a chair, the smooth economy of his stride. No wasted energy. These were not traits of a simple bar owner. "Something about him doesn't fit," she murmured to Maria, who sat across from her. Maria, silver-haired and unflappable, lifted an eyebrow. "Doesn't fit how?" Alexandra swirled the coffee, thinking. "Most folks who run a mountain bar talk about the next beer shipment or how the furnace keeps failing. Not about generator vents and rationing like they're running a field camp. And those scars on his forearms, that's shrapnel, not kitchen burns." Maria chuckled softly. "Maybe he's just a careful man." "Maybe," Alexandra said, but doubt lingered. From her seat, she watched Jack kneel beside Lily, helping the girl lace her winter boots. The affection in his touch was unmistakable, protective, yet gentle. Alexandra felt an unexpected tug in her chest. Compassion and discipline rarely live so comfortably in the same man. Her thoughts slipped to her father, a Marine who had never returned from his second deployment. The way Jack tied Lily's boots with quick, neat knots mirrored how her father had secured her shoelaces before every childhood hike. The resemblance ached. After breakfast, the riders busied themselves. Some played cards, others oiled chains or checked bike batteries. But Alexandra remained watchful. When Jack stepped outside to shovel a path to the propane tank, she followed. The air bit at her cheeks and snow squeaked beneath her boots. Jack noticed her approach but didn't pause. "Need something?" he asked without looking up. "I like to know the man whose roof I'm sleeping under," she said, matching his stride. "And I'd like to know why he moves like someone who's cleared buildings under fire." Jack's shovel cut a clean arc through the snow. He let the blade rest a moment before answering. "Old habits. Habits don't come from nowhere." He exhaled a cloud in the cold. "Served in the Marines. Long time ago." Alexandra folded her arms. "That explains some of it, but not all." Jack's brown eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "It's all I care to explain." For a moment, only the whisper of falling snow filled the silence. Alexandra wasn't used to being deflected. Most people spilled details under her level gaze, but Jack simply returned to work, every movement deliberate. When they re-entered the bar, the warmth hit like a soft wave. Lily ran up with a drawing of a silver motorcycle, her face bright. Jack crouched to admire it, his expression softening. Alexandra watched closely, searching for any crack in his armor. All she saw was a father's love, fierce and uncomplicated. Still, the puzzle nagged her. She had met men who had passed through fire, some dangerous, some simply wounded. Which was Jack? That afternoon, as the storm eased to a quiet snowfall, Alexandra gathered a few riders to inspect their bikes. The machines were half buried under drifts, chrome dulled by ice. They worked quickly, clearing snow from exhaust pipes and testing batteries. Jack joined them carrying a bucket of warm sand to melt stubborn patches of ice. His instructions were brief and competent, like a platoon sergeant checking equipment. Alexandra exchanged a glance with Maria. Neither needed to say it aloud. Later, while Jack prepared a simple stew from beans and a handful of root vegetables, Alexandra drifted to the bar. She leaned on the counter at ease, following his hands as he sliced onions with swift, even strokes. "You run this place alone?" she asked. "Lily helps when she can," he said without looking up. "No partner, no staff, not anymore." The words were flat, but the pause afterward carried weight. Alexandra sensed a story loss, maybe grief lurking behind those two syllables. She felt the urge to press, but stopped. Something in his posture warned her away like a door gently closed. Instead, she shifted the subject. "You know, most people would have sent us packing. 20 strangers on loud bikes, storm or not." Jack's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Most people don't live on a mountain where storms kill if you turn folks away." "Still," Alexander said softly, "that was a lot of trust." "Trust is how people survive," he replied. The simplicity of the statement struck her. It wasn't bravado, it was belief. As evening fell, the group settled around the stove with mugs of hot cider. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, giggling, as Skylar taught her a biker card game. Maria recounted a desert ride under a sky full of meteors, the bar filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Alexandra watched Jack from across the room. He leaned against the bar arms, folded, scanning the gathering with quiet satisfaction. The faint scar along his jaw caught the firelight, a reminder of battles she could only imagine. She felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a mixture of admiration and curiosity that edged toward respect. Yet the mystery of him remained like a locked box. When Jack finally joined them near the fire, Maria raised a mug. "To our host, the quiet man who opened his door." A chorus of toasts followed, warm and sincere. Jack accepted with a modest nod, his eyes drifting to Lily, who beamed at the attention. Alexandra's gaze lingered on him long after the laughter faded. He was more than a host, more than a bar owner. The question was how much more, and why he worked so hard to keep that part hidden. Outside, the blizzard softened into a gentle, endless fall, like feathers from a giant pillow. Inside, unspoken currents deepened. Trust was forming, but so was Alexandra's determination to understand the quiet Marine who had turned a snowbound night into an unexpected sanctuary. She didn't yet know that the answer waited not in words, but beneath a single button of his worn flannel shirt, a secret etched in ink and scar tissue, soon to change everything. Night settled over the mountains like a heavy wool blanket. Outside, the blizzard that had once screamed now murmured in softer tones, but the cold cut deeper than ever. Inside, logs hissed and popped in the stove, sending waves of heat that mingled with the scent of pine sap and slow-cooked beans. Jack stood at the hearth, sleeves rolled to his elbows, carefully stacking new firewood. The room behind him glowed with an almost festive warmth. Mugs of steaming cider on tables. Soft laughter from bikers swapping road stories. Lily drawing elaborate swirls of snowflakes and motorcycles on a scrap of paper. Alexandra watched from her corner seat, eyes narrowed in quiet thought. For 2 days she had studied this man, his precise movements, his unshakable calm, the scars on his forearms. Her instincts, honed by years of leading Silver Wings across unpredictable highways, told her he was more than a bar owner with a gentle heart. But he had offered only hints, served a while old habits. The fire snapped, scattering embers. Jack leaned forward to add another log. As he did, his worn flannel shirt shifted, and for an instant the top button strained open. A triangle of skin, bronzed by sun and scarred by time, caught the firelight. Alexandra's gaze sharpened. Beneath that glimpse of skin, something darker curved in bold lines. Ink. She rose without thinking. The room's laughter dimmed behind her as she crossed the floor boots, silent on the pine boards. Jack didn't notice her approach, his focus on the stove. When she reached him, the warmth of the fire washed over her face. "Careful," she said softly. "That one's not set right." He turned, surprised but calm. "Thanks, almost done." A loose ember popped, and instinctively Alexandra stepped closer. Her hand brushed his shoulder as she reached to steady a log that threatened to roll. The motion was natural, almost protective, until her fingers brushed the soft edge of his shirt collar and felt the rough texture of something beneath. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then with a gentle tug meant to free a caught fold of fabric, she lifted the top button and shifted the collar aside. What she saw made her breath catch. Across Jack's left chest, a sprawling tattoo blazed in black and scarlet ink, the emblem of the United States Marine Corps. The eagle, globe, and anchor were rendered with striking artistry. Above the crest, the words Semper Fidelis arched in bold serif script. Below, the faint outline of a combat ribbon seemed almost alive under the flicker of firelight. Alexandra's hand froze midair. Her gray eyes widened. Every sound in the room seemed to fall away, cards mid-shuffle, conversations half finished. Only the soft hiss of the fire and the muted breath of the storm outside remained. Jack straightened, realizing too late what had happened. His instinct was to step back, but Alexandra's stunned expression rooted him in place. The silence spread like a wave. One by one, the silver wings turned to look. Conversations died. Even Lily, sensing the shift, lowered her pencil and stared. Alexandra finally found her voice, but it came out as a whisper. Marine Corps. Jack held her gaze steady and unflinching. Once, a long time ago, Maria, who rarely showed surprise, exhaled a low whistle. That's no casual tattoo. That's a lifetime. The air in the room changed, charged with something between reverence and awe. The women who had spent years defying stereotypes of fragility now looked at Jack with new understanding. Alexandra's mind flashed with images, her father's crisp uniform, the folded flag handed to her family, the long nights, wondering what courage and sacrifice had truly meant. The same emblem now marked the chest of the quiet man who had sheltered them without question. You never said she managed. You never asked, Jack replied, his voice even, but not cold. Alexandra's throat tightened. That emblem, it's my father's world. He was a Marine. He never made it home. Something softened in Jack's eyes. He reached for his button but paused, as though understanding that the truth finally visible deserved a moment in the open. I'm sorry for your loss, and I thank him for his service. A long breath passed through the room like the collective exhale of 20 riders who suddenly felt they were in the presence of something larger than themselves. The questions came slowly, respectfully. How many tours? Maria asked. 2 in the Middle East, Jack answered, keeping his tone level. Recon unit, hard years, good men. Why leave it behind? Another biker ventured. Jack's gaze drifted to Lily, who sat cross-legged with wide, serious eyes. I had someone who needed me more than the Corps. When my wife passed, he swallowed, once steadying himself. Lily was 3. I came home for good. The words landed heavy and gentle all at once. The bikers, many of whom carried scars of their own lost parents, broken families, roads that stretched into lonely distances, felt the truth settle deep. Alexandra's eyes softened, her earlier suspicion melting into something else entirely. Respect, yes, but also connection. You fought for a country that sometimes forgets its fighters, she said quietly. And now you're fighting for this place. For her, Jack offered a small nod. The mission just changed. The room slowly found its breath again. Conversations resumed, but at a lower register, no longer the casual chatter of strangers, but the thoughtful sharing of people who had glimpsed one another's deepest truths. Lily slipped from her stool and padded to her father's side. Without a word, she climbed into his arms. Jack held her close, the Marine emblem still visible, glowing faintly in the firelight, like a quiet vow. Alexandra looked at him, then at Lily, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. She thought of Silver Wing's own mission, protecting women on the road, offering shelter to those cast aside. Maybe their paths had crossed this night for more than mere survival. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. Semper Fidelis. She said the Latin words always faithful, ringing with new meaning. Jack met her eyes and returned the phrase softly, like a promise. The storm outside moaned and shifted, but inside the North Star something unshakable had formed. Not just trust, kinship. The Marine's tattoo, revealed almost by accident, had become a beacon binding a band of wandering bikers and a quiet father into a single unexpected company. And though no one could name it yet, they all felt the same quiet certainty. This night marked the beginning of a bond that would outlast the snow, the mountain, and even the debt waiting in a bank envelope under the bar. The North Star Lodge seemed to breathe differently after the revelation of Jack's Marine Corps tattoo. It was as if the fire in the stove had grown a second heart, pulsing warmth and quiet respect into every corner. The storm outside had slowed to a ghostly whisper, the world wrapped in deep winter silence. But inside, the air vibrated with something new. kinship. Dawn filtered through frost-covered windows as Alexandra Blackwood knelt before the old ham radio she'd retrieved from her saddlebags. Her slender fingers adjusted knobs with practiced precision, the static crackling like distant campfires. Several silver wings gathered around their faces tight with concentration. We need to reach any chapter within range. Alexandra's voice carried authority despite its softness. Especially Utah and Wyoming. They'll have the best access routes once the storm breaks. The radio hissed and popped, occasional fragments of voices breaking through before dissolving back into white noise. Alexandra's persistence was unwavering, trying different frequencies, adjusting the antenna they'd rigged to the highest point of the lodge's roof. Jack watched from across the room, recognizing the focus of someone accustomed to completing missions regardless of obstacles. Lily had awoken early, her small hands busy with paper and colored pencils scavenged from her room. She sat cross-legged beside Maria, the silver-haired rider, whose gentle patience had won the child's trust completely. Under Maria's guidance, Lily's drawings had evolved from simple sketches to detailed renderings of motorcycles and riders. Each completed artwork was ceremoniously presented to its subject, received with genuine appreciation that made the girl's face glow. Jack moved through the kitchen area, mentally calculating supplies. The pantry's meager contents stared back at him: 3 cans of beans, half a sack of potatoes, some flour and coffee. 2 days of food at most, stretched thin among 22 people. He jotted notes on a pad, mapping out ration plans, his military training, transforming scarcity into strategy. This isn't your first time managing limited supplies, is it? Maria had appeared beside him, her keen eyes noting his methodical inventory. Jack's mouth quirked slightly. When you've fed a squad in the desert with nothing but MREs and local markets, you learn to make something from nothing. Maria nodded, the silver in her hair catching morning light. I was a school principal before I retired. 30 years of stretching budgets to feed young minds. Not quite the same as the Marines, but I'd say feeding knowledge to kids takes more courage than any battlefield. Jack replied, something genuine warming his voice for the first time since the bikers' arrival. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a triumphant shout from Alexandra. The radio had finally caught a clear signal. A Silver Wings chapter in Laramie, Wyoming had responded. Jack moved closer, listening as Alexandra rapidly explained their situation. Her words clipped and precise. The location of the North Star, the number of stranded riders, the conditions of the pass, and after a glance toward Jack, the situation with the bank and Madison developers. The voice on the other end crackled with determination. We can mobilize at least 15 riders with cold weather gear. Maybe more if we tap the Veterans Network. But the roads are still closed at the state line. Earliest we could reach you is tomorrow, maybe the day after. Alexandra's eyes met Jack's across the room. Tomorrow felt both impossibly distant and dangerously close to his foreclosure deadline. She turned back to the radio, her voice lowered, but still audible. And the other matter, the financial situation. Static filled the pause before the reply came. I'll contact Rachel. She's got connections in banking. Give me the details and we'll see what we can do. Silver Wings don't leave their own behind, or those who shelter them. Jack's shoulders stiffened. He hadn't agreed to this, hadn't asked for financial rescue. Pride warred with practicality as he turned away, busying himself with stoking the fire. The flames leapt higher, throwing his shadow large against the wall, while 20 pairs of eyes tracked the silent battle playing across his features. Alexandra finished her transmission and approached Jack slowly, respecting the boundary of his silence. You're angry, she stated simply. I don't need charity. Good, because I'm not offering any. Alexandra's voice had the edge of steel wrapped in velvet. What I am offering is alliance. There's a difference. Jack met her gaze, the Marine in him recognizing a fellow commander. I've fought my own battles for 8 years, since Emily died, since I hung up the uniform. I'm still standing. And now you're facing foreclosure with a child to protect and 20 strangers to feed, Alexandra countered. No Marine ever won a war by refusing reinforcements. That's not courage, that's pride. And pride makes for poor armor when the enemy's at the gate. The room had gone silent, the other riders pretending not to listen while absorbing every word. Even Lily had paused, her drawing eyes wide with the intuitive understanding of children who recognize when adult worlds are shifting. Several bikers had gathered near the windows, their postures alert as they tracked something moving outside. A vehicle's engine growled in the distance, different from their motorcycles, heavier, more aggressive. Jack moved to the window, wiping frost from the glass with his palm. A black Jeep Cherokee with oversized tires was forcing its way up the snow-covered road chains, biting into ice. "Looks like your enemies arrived early," Alexandra murmured, stepping beside him. Richard Coleman. Jack's jaw tightened. Madison Developers' attack dog. The man had been harassing him for months, each offer for the property lower than the last, each deadline tighter. The foreclosure wasn't just bad luck, it was engineered pressure designed to force Jack's hand. The Jeep parked with aggressive precision directly in front of the North Star's entrance, engine running, as if to emphasize its driver had no intention of staying long. A tall man in an expensive North Face parka emerged, his clean-shaven face tight with the concentration of someone navigating treacherous terrain while wearing Italian leather boots never intended for snow. Jack moved to the door, his stance automatically shifting to what Alexandra recognized immediately as a defensive posture, weight, centered hands loose at his sides, chin slightly tucked. She signaled silently to several riders who casually repositioned themselves around the room, creating an invisible perimeter that any military tactician would appreciate. The door swung open, bringing a blast of cold air and Richard Coleman's artificial smile. "Well, well, Jack Sullivan actually has customers." Wonders never cease. Coleman's eyes widened fractionally as he registered the number of women in leather vests, his forced smile flickering as he recalculated the situation. "Just checking on how you weathered the storm." Being neighborly, Jack's face remained impassive. Neighborly would have been a phone call, or not pressuring the bank to foreclose in the middle of winter. Coleman laughed, the sound as hollow as a frozen lake. "Business is business, nothing personal." His gaze swept over the leather-clad women with poorly disguised disdain. "Though I'm surprised to see you've turned the place into a biker hostel. Not exactly upscale clientele, is it?" Alexandra stepped forward, her movement fluid as water, but with unmistakable purpose. She extended her hands, silver rings glinting. "Alexandra Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Tech. And you must be the representative from Madison Developers we've heard so much about." Coleman's expression shifted from dismissive to calculating in an instant. The tech entrepreneur Alexandra Blackwood, his handshake was too firm, too eager. "What brings someone like you to this establishment?" "My organization, Silver Wings, appreciates authentic American experiences." Alexandra's smile never reached her eyes. "Places with history, character, and proprietors who understand the meaning of service. We've been evaluating potential investment opportunities throughout the Mountain West. Locations with untapped potential." The words hung in the air, pointed as icicles. Coleman's gaze darted between Alexandra and Jack, reassessing the power dynamics he'd assumed upon entry. "Investment opportunity." Here Jack watched this exchange with wary confusion. Whatever game Alexandra was playing, he hadn't agreed to the rules. Yet there was something satisfying about seeing Coleman thrown off his practiced script. Alexandra continued smoothly. "Mr. Sullivan's establishment has exactly the character profile our network seeks. Authentic, veteran-owned, community-centered. We're quite interested in what it might become with the right partnership structure." Coleman's smile returned sharper now. "Well, that's fascinating timing, considering the property's current financial challenges. Perhaps we should discuss possible arrangements. Madison Developers is always open to creative solutions." He reached into his parka, extracting a business card held between two manicured fingers. "My direct line. Call me when you're ready for serious discussion." Alexander accepted the card with practiced indifference. "Of course. Though, I should mention, we're also investigating certain development companies in the region. Due diligence, you understand. We like to know who else might be operating in our potential investment zones." Her smile tightened. "And how they operate." Something flickered across Coleman's face, uncertainty, perhaps concern. "Well, I won't interrupt your gathering. Just wanted to check that everything was functional after the storm. The foreclosure proceedings continue as scheduled, Jack. Unless, of course, something changes." He glanced pointedly at Alexandra before turning toward the door. When the Jeep had disappeared back down the mountain road, leaving nothing but exhaust clouds hanging in the cold air, Jack turned to Alexandra, his expression a storm of its own. "What exactly was that? I don't need you making promises about my property." "I didn't promise anything," Alexandra countered calmly. "I created doubt and bought time. Men like Coleman operate on certainty, The certainty that you're desperate, isolated, and without options. I simply introduced variables he didn't expect. Several riders had clustered around Tara, the youngest Silverwing, with electric blue hair streaks, who was furiously typing on a slim laptop. Her fingers flew across the keys, eyes narrowed behind blue frame glasses. Madison Developers has quite the reputation, she announced to the room. 3 lawsuits in the last 2 years for predatory acquisition tactics, allegations of manipulating local zoning boards, and her eyebrows lifted, interesting political donations to officials who later approved their permits despite environmental concerns. Alexandra nodded as if this confirmed suspicions. They targeted you specifically, Jack. This isn't random bad luck. They want this location and engineered the circumstances to force you out. Jack's fists clenched at his sides. I know, they've been circling since Emily died. Started friendly, got less so when I refused to sell. He glanced toward Lily, still absorbed in her drawing, seemingly oblivious to the tension vibrating through the room. The debt is real enough, though. Medical bills, repairs after last year's storm damage. The bank's not wrong about what I owe. Maria had joined them, her calm presence a counterpoint to the gathering storm of anger and determination. Jack, she spoke gently. Sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is accept the help of allies. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. Jack looked at the 20 women who had transformed from strangers to something else entirely in less than 48 hours. Their faces reflected a resolve he recognized from his time in uniform, the unspoken pact among those who understood that survival sometimes depended on trusting others to have your back. Alexandra watched this internal struggle with patient intensity. We're not asking permission to help you, Marine. We're informing you of our intention to fight alongside you. The decision isn't whether to accept help, it's whether you'll stand with us or waste energy pushing us away while we help you anyway. A small sound from across the room drew their attention. Lily stood clutching a new drawing. This one showed the North Star Lodge, surrounded by motorcycles with stick figures holding hands in a protective circle around the building. Mommy always said the strongest people know when to hold hands with friends. The simple truth from his daughter's lips broke something open in Jack's chest. He knelt to her level, taking the drawing with careful hands. Your mom was the smartest person I ever knew. And you're just like her. When he stood again facing Alexander and the Silverwings, his decision had been made. If you're determined to ride into this battle with me, I won't stop you. But I need to understand the plan. Alexandra's rare, genuine smile transformed her face. First, we secure communications, then supplies, then reinforcements. And then she glanced toward Coleman's departing tire tracks in the snow. We find out exactly what Madison Developers doesn't want us to know about their interest in this property. The remainder of the day unfolded with military precision. Alexandra divided the riders into teams, each assigned specific responsibilities. The communications team boosted the radio signal by repositioning the antenna. The resources team cataloged every supply and identified critical needs. The intelligence team, led by Tara, dug deeper into Madison Developers' history and regional activities. Jack found himself impressed despite his lingering reservations. These women operated with a cohesion and efficiency that reminded him of his Marine unit. They moved with purpose, communicated clearly, and anticipated problems before they arose. By mid-afternoon, they had a comprehensive situation assessment and the beginnings of a strategic response. Not every Silverwing was immediately on board. A heated discussion erupted when Alexandra outlined her intention to mobilize resources from multiple chapters to address Jack's financial situation. This isn't what Silverwings was built for, Skylar? Argued, her voice sharp with concern. We support women in crisis, veterans with specific needs, not random businesses that made bad financial decisions. Alexandra's eyes flashed. First, nothing about Jack's situation is random. He's being deliberately targeted. Second, he's a decorated Marine who opened his doors to 20 strangers in a blizzard without hesitation. And third, she stepped closer to Skylar, her voice lowering. This is exactly what my father would have done. The Marine who inspired Silverwings in the first place. The challenge hung in the air between them. Skylar held Alexandra's gaze for a long moment before finally nodding. Your call, boss. I'll back your play, but not everyone in the organization will understand this detour from mission. It's not a detour, Maria interjected softly. It's an extension. Her weathered hand smoothed her Silverwings vest. We don't just ride for ourselves, we ride for what's right. The debate settled, Alexandra returned to the ham radio, making contact with chapters in Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado. Each transmission outlined the situation and requested specific support funds, supplies, mechanical assistance, and most importantly, legal and financial expertise to counter Madison developers' pressure tactics. With each successful contact, a map on the wall grew more detailed, marking the locations of responding chapters and their estimated arrival times once the roads cleared. Jack watched this mobilization with growing amazement, the realization dawning that what had begun as a chance encounter in a blizzard was evolving into something that felt remarkably like a military campaign. "I never expected this kind of response," he admitted to Alexandra as they studied the map together. 20 women stuck in a storm, I can understand. But this, he gestured to the markers representing over 100 riders preparing to converge on the North Star. "This is something else entirely." Alexandra's expression softened. "You recognized my father's Marine Corps values when I told you about him. Now you're seeing mine. I built Silver Wings on the principles he lived by: loyalty, honor, courage. We don't leave people behind, especially those who've sacrificed for others." A sudden commotion near the front windows interrupted their conversation. Tara called out with urgency, "Weather report just came through on emergency bands. Another storm system is moving in fast. Smaller than the first, but it's going to drop another foot of snow before morning." Jack moved quickly to the window, studying the horizon where dark clouds were already gathering against the afternoon sky. The news complicated everything. Additional snow would further delay any arriving reinforcements, stretch their dwindling supplies, and increase the risk of power failure. "How's our generator fuel?" he asked mine, already calculating alternatives. "Half tank," Skylar reported. "Maybe 12 hours at current usage." Jack's decision was immediate. "We cut power use to minimum. Heat only in the main room, one light, cooking only when absolutely necessary." He turned to the group, his Marine Command presence emerging naturally. "We need to consolidate everything in here. Sleeping arrangements near the stove. Body heat will help conserve fuel. Water from melted snow stored in every available container." The riders moved without question, recognizing the voice of experience. Jack continued issuing directions, each instruction clear and purposeful. They would weather this second storm through discipline and preparation. As the group reorganized the lodge's main room, Alexandra intercepted a radio transmission that sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. She motioned Jack aside, her expression grave. "That was our contact in town. Coleman's been at the bank all afternoon. He's pushing to expedite the foreclosure process, trying to move it up before any help can arrive." Jack's face hardened. "Can he do that?" "Legally, maybe not. But he's got leverage with the bank president, golf buddies apparently. He's painting a picture that you're converting the property to some kind of unauthorized biker compound. Using us as evidence, you're violating zoning regulations." The manipulation was as clear as it was infuriating. Coleman had seen Alexandra's interest as a threat and was moving to cut off any possibility of rescue. Jack paced the length of the bar, mind racing through diminishing options. Even with the Silver Wings support network mobilizing, they couldn't outrun a fast-tracked foreclosure. Alexandra watched him process this setback, noting the way his shoulders remained squared, despite the weight bearing down on them. Her phone buzzed, a rare signal getting through the storm. The message was from her company's legal department, responding to her earlier inquiry about Madison developers. Her sharp intake of breath drew Jack's attention. "What is it?" Alexandra held up the phone, her expression fierce with discovery. "County records. Madison has been buying up properties all along this ridge. 6 acquisitions in the last year. And there's a filing with the State Environmental Office for a major development project, a luxury resort complex. But they're missing a crucial access point for their main entrance." She zoomed in on the property map. "Your property, Jack. The North Star sits exactly where they need their grand entrance to be." Understanding dawned across Jack's features. "That's why the pressure. That's why the rush. Without this land, their entire project design fails. And they'd rather force you into foreclosure than pay what the property is actually worth." Alexandra concluded, the pieces fitting together. "They're not just being opportunistic, they're being predatory." This revelation reverberated through the room as other riders gathered to examine the evidence. The abstract concept of a financial deadline had transformed into something more tangible, A deliberate attempt to steal not just Jack's business, but his home and future. As if responding to the mounting tension inside, the storm outside intensified. Wind howled against the windows with renewed fury, and snow began falling in thick diagonal sheets. The sky darkened prematurely, afternoon surrendering to a false twilight as clouds smothered the mountain. Jack stood at the window watching nature's assault mirror his internal turmoil. 8 years of building this place, of creating a stable home for Lily after losing Emily, of finding purpose beyond the core, all of it threatened by corporate greed disguised as business strategy. Alexandra's voice broke through his thoughts. We fight this on two fronts: legal counteraction through our network and a direct appeal to the bank's regional manager, who fortunately is a Silver Wings supporter's brother-in-law. She placed a hand on his shoulder, the contact brief but grounding. This isn't over, Marine, not even close. Before Jack could respond, a sharp crack split the air, followed by a deep rumbling that shook the building to its foundation. Everyone froze, recognizing the sound instantly: avalanche. Not close enough to threaten them directly, but certainly near enough to block the already tenuous mountain road completely. We're cut off now, Jack stated the obvious, his voice calm despite the implications. No one in or out until road crews clear the pass. Could be days. The secondary storm system had triggered exactly what they'd feared: a natural barrier between them and any approaching help. The maps on the wall with their hopeful markings of inbound support suddenly seemed like wishful thinking rather than tactical reality. As darkness fell completely, the group gathered around the stove, its heat now more precious than ever. Supplies were arranged in neat stacks, rations for at least 3 days, if carefully managed. Water containers lined one wall. Sleeping areas had been designated, with the youngest and oldest nearest the heat source. Jack moved among them, checking blankets, confirming comfort, his caretaker role extending naturally from Lily to these 20 women who had become improbably his allies. When he finally settled beside his daughter, who was already drowsy against Maria's shoulder, Alexandra joined them, her expression thoughtful. Even with the roads blocked, she said quietly, our network is still moving. The legal team is filing emergency injunctions against any accelerated foreclosure. The financial team is assembling funds. The problem now is time and access, Jack nodded, understanding the tactical assessment. We hold this position, conserve resources, wait for conditions to improve. His military training provided clarity: when forward movement is impossible, strengthen your current location and prepare for the next opportunity to advance. Lily stirred against Maria, blinking sleepily up at her father and Alexandra. Are we going to lose our home? Her small voice carried in the quiet room a reminder of what truly hung in the balance. Jack gathered her close, choosing his words carefully. We're facing a challenge, sweetheart, but we've got unexpected friends helping us fight. He glanced at the women around the room, their faces illuminated by firelight. And Sullivans don't give up just because the road gets hard. Alexandra watched this exchange, something tight and protective awakening in her chest. Before she could speak, a mechanical groaning from the back room interrupted, followed by a faltering in the single lamp that lit their gathering. The generator's rhythm stuttered, coughed, and then stabilized, but the warning was clear. Jack was on his feet immediately. Fuel line's freezing. We need to clear it now or we lose power completely. 2 riders with mechanical experience volunteered instantly, already reaching for their jackets. Alexandra rose as well, but Jack shook his head. I need you here. Coordinate. Keep everyone calm. If we don't come back, his eyes held hers. You're in command. The unexpected transfer of authority, so natural, so rooted in their shared understanding of leadership, momentarily silenced her. Then Alexandra nodded once, accepting the responsibility with the gravity it deserved. We'll be ready either way. Jack and the 2 riders disappeared into the howling darkness, the door closing behind them with ominous finality. Those remaining gathered closer to the stove, their conversations hushed, eyes frequently darting to the windows, where snow pummeled the glass with increasing violence. Alexandra settled beside Lily, who watched the door with wide, worried eyes. Your dad is very good at fixing things, she assured the child. It's what Marines do. They find solutions when most people only see problems. Lily's small fingers found Alexandra's, gripping with surprising strength. Daddy says Marines never leave anyone behind, but sometimes people leave anyway, like Mommy. The simple truth pierced Alexandra's carefully maintained composure. She drew the girl closer, finding words that honored both the fear and the hope. Some departures we can't prevent, no matter how brave or strong we are. But your father isn't going anywhere, and neither are we. She gestured to the silver wings around them. We're all standing guard tonight. Minutes stretched into a tense half-hour with no sign of Jack and his repair team. The generator's rhythm had stabilized somewhat, but still stuttered occasionally, each hiccup sending a ripple of anxiety through the gathered women. Alexandra maintained a calm exterior, but her eyes never left the door, tracking each second of absence with growing concern. When the door finally burst open, admitting a blast of frigid air and three snow-covered figures, the relief was palpable. Jack stamped his boots, snow falling in clumps from his jacket, his face red with cold, but his eyes bright with achievement. Fix the fuel line and reinforce the exhaust vent, he announced, his breath clouding in the warmer indoor air. We should be good until morning at least. What had seemed like a simple repair had clearly been a battle against elemental forces. The three returned with minor injuries, a scraped knuckle, a bruised shoulder from slipping on ice. But their success had secured the one thing the group couldn't survive without: heat. As the night deepened and the storm continued its assault on the mountain, the North Star's main room transformed into an impromptu camp. Sleeping forms huddled in borrowed blankets, boots and jackets serving as pillows. Lily had fallen asleep against Jack's side, her small face peaceful despite the chaos of their circumstances. Alexandra and Jack remained awake, speaking in low voices by the stove, their conversation a mixture of tactical planning and more personal revelations. Why a tech company CEO rides with silver wings isn't the usual career path, Jack observed, stoking the fire with careful precision. Alexandra's smile was faint but genuine. I built Blackwood Tech from nothing after my father died, coded the first prototype in my apartment while working two other jobs. When success came, it came fast, too fast. I found myself in board meetings with men in expensive suits who'd never missed a meal or wondered if they'd have a home next month. She stretched her hands toward the fire's warmth. I needed to remember what was real. The road does that. The women who ride with me, they're the most authentic people I know. Jack nodded, understanding more than she might have expected. The Corps gave me that reality stripped to its essentials. Who stands beside you when everything goes to hell? Who shares their last water? Who carries the extra weight when your legs are giving out? They fell silent, recognizing in each other a similar search for meaning beyond society's comfortable illusions. The storm outside battered the lodge with renewed fury, but inside something equally powerful was building, an alliance forged in shared values and mutual respect that transcended their brief acquaintance. Dawn arrived gray and grudging, offering little respite from the storm that had raged through the night. Jack woke first, military habits persisting despite exhaustion. He checked the generator, confirmed their remaining fuel, and started coffee with the last of their grounds. The rich aroma gradually roused the others from uneasy sleep. Alexandra joined him at the window, where they silently assessed the transformed landscape. Snow had drifted against the lodge's walls in some places, reaching halfway up the windows. The motorcycles were completely buried, only the tallest handlebars visible above the white expanse. The mountain road had vanished entirely beneath fresh powder, at least 2 feet deep. How bad, she asked simply. Bad enough, Jack replied. No traffic getting through this until county plows make it up. Could be another day. Maybe 2. Alexandra processed this with the calm of a leader accustomed to adjusting plans mid-execution. Our supplies, Jack's assessment was equally direct. Food for 1 more day if we stretch it. Generator fuel for maybe 12 hours. After that, it's the fireplace and whatever we can scavenge. The stark reality of their situation hung between them, neither sugarcoating the challenges ahead. They had weathered one storm only to face another, with dwindling resources and increasing pressure from both natural and human adversaries. And yet, as they turned from the window to face the room where Lily was helping Maria distribute the last of their bread for a simple breakfast, both felt something that defied logical explanation. Not quite hope, but its more battle-tested cousin, determination. Whatever Madison developers had planned, whatever the storm had unleashed, they would face it together, Marine and CEO, father and riders, the North Star and Silverwings. The unlikely alliance had been forged in crisis, but was strengthening with each passing hour, transforming from convenience to conviction, from accident to purpose. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside, plans were taking shape that would change everything, not just for Jack and the North Star, but for Silverwings and the entire mountain community. None of them could have predicted how their convergence would alter the landscape both literally and figuratively in the days to come. The second storm had sealed them in, but it had also sealed their commitment to a fight that was only beginning. Madison developers had miscalculated badly when they had assumed Jack Sullivan stood alone. They would soon discover the error of underestimating what happens when warriors recognize each other and choose to stand together regardless of the odds. As the day progressed, Jack and Alexandra continued to develop their strategy, neither fully aware that their alliance was evolving into something beyond tactical, something that would eventually challenge not just a corporate developer's plans, but their own carefully guarded hearts as well. The temperature in the North Star Lodge had fallen to dangerous levels overnight. Frost patterns crept across interior walls, and exhaled breath hung visible in the air like reluctant ghosts. The 22 people huddled in the main room had abandoned individual spaces, forming a tight circle around the wood stove, their last reliable source of heat after the generator had finally surrendered to the brutal cold during the pre-dawn hours. Jack Sullivan knelt before the stove, methodically coaxing flames from their dwindling supply of dry wood. His movements were precise, born from years of military survival training and harsh mountain winters. Each log was precious now, each ember essential. The cold had become an entity, with weight and presence pressing against them from all sides, probing for any weakness in their defenses. "We're down to the emergency cache," he informed Alexandra without looking up. "Maybe 6 hours of good burning left." Alexandra nodded, her commanding presence subdued but unbroken. Silver rings glinted on fingers that had gone pale with cold despite her fingerless gloves. 3 Silver Wings riders had already developed worrying coughs, minor for now, but concerning in conditions that would only deteriorate further. Lily remained remarkably resilient, her small body nestled between Maria and Skylar, beneath every available blanket. The child's optimism persisted despite their dire situation, her voice occasionally rising to share observations or questions that reminded the adults of the innocence they were fighting to protect. "How cold before pipes freeze?" Alexandra asked, her tactical mind continuously assessing threats. "Already happening," Jack replied, positioning another log with careful precision. "I've drained what I could, left taps dripping. Might save some of the system." The faint crackle of the radio interrupted their exchange, a signal breaking through static for the first time in hours. Alexandra moved swiftly to the device, adjusting dials with fingers that had grown clumsy in the cold. Through sporadic bursts of white noise came a woman's voice, determined and clear. "Approaching from Wyoming side. Plows clearing. ETA approximately 4 hours. 20 riders with supplies. Confirm if you receive." Alexandra's eyes met Jack's across the room, a flash of triumph passing between them. She pressed the transmit button. Message received. 22 souls holding position. Conditions deteriorating. Generator failed. Heating critical. Medical concerns developing. The response came through stronger. Understood. Expediting approach. Bringing medical fuel food. Electrical team included. Hold position. A ripple of cautious hope moved through the gathered women. 4 hours suddenly seemed both impossibly distant and tantalizingly close, the difference between hypothermia and salvation. Jack unfolded a thermal emergency blanket he'd kept in his survival kit, draping it across 3 of the older riders who had begun showing early signs of cold stress. Alexandra joined him, her voice pitched low. "That was Karen from Laramie chapter. If she says 4 hours, she means it. She's Army Corps of Engineers. Doesn't make promises she can't keep." Jack nodded, military instincts, trusting her assessment of a fellow veteran. He swept his gaze across the room, calculating needs versus resources with the precision that had kept Marines alive in hostile environments. They would need to consolidate, further share more body heat, and possibly move everyone into the kitchen, the smallest space with the best insulation. Before he could suggest these measures, the distant sound of an engine cut through the morning stillness. Not the rumble of motorcycles, but the aggressive growl of a vehicle pushing through deep snow. Jack moved to the frost-covered window, scraping a viewing space with his palm. His muscles tensed as he recognized the black Jeep Cherokee forcing its way up what remained of the road. Richard Coleman had returned, and this time he'd brought reinforcements. A county sheriff's vehicle followed closely behind. "We've got company," Jack announced, his voice commanding immediate attention. "Coleman's back," brought the sheriff with him. Alexandra joined him at the window, her expression hardening as she assessed the new threat. Could be a legitimate welfare check, or could be another pressure tactic. The room transformed instantly from a group of cold survivors to a defensive unit. Silverwings moved with practiced coordination, those with legal backgrounds gathering near the front, while others ensured Lily was kept safely away from any confrontation. Maria retrieved a small camera from her bag, ready to document whatever transpired. Coleman emerged from his vehicle, first his expensive parka immaculate despite the treacherous conditions. The sheriff followed, a stocky man with a weathered face partially hidden beneath a regulation winter hat. Both men trudged through knee-deep snow toward the entrance, Coleman's Italian boots, now protected by hastily added snow gaiters. Jack opened the door before they could knock, standing firmly in the threshold. Sheriff Donovan, Richard. Unusual weather for a social call. Sheriff Donovan nodded respectfully. Welfare check Sullivan. Got reports of potential overcrowding, unsafe conditions. Just doing my job. Coleman's artificial smile appeared, though it failed to reach his eyes. We're concerned about code violations, Jack. All these motorcycles, all these guests. The property isn't zoned for commercial lodging. Plus, his gaze swept past Jack to the crowded room beyond potential health hazards, with so many people in a structure with inadequate facilities. The strategic nature of this visit became immediately clear. Coleman was attempting to use safety regulations as a weapon, creating a pretext for forcing everyone out and potentially accelerating the foreclosure by documenting violations. Alexandra stepped forward, her CEO persona fully engaged despite the cold that had turned her lips slightly blue. Sheriff Donovan, I'm Alexandra Blackwood. We're not commercial guests. We're a registered nonprofit organization caught in a weather emergency. She produced identification with corporate efficiency. I believe Good Samaritan laws in Colorado specifically protect property owners who provide emergency shelter during life-threatening conditions. The sheriff's expression shifted subtly, a recognition flickering across his features. Blackwood Tech, the security systems company, the same. Alexandra's tone remained professional but took on a warmer note. Your department probably uses our body cameras. Model SC-420. We supplied most law enforcement agencies in this region after the federal grant program last year. Sheriff Donovan straightened slightly, reassessing the situation with this new information. He glanced at Coleman, then back to the room filled with women who were clearly experiencing genuine hardship. Good Samaritan laws do apply here, Mr. Coleman. I'm not seeing any violations that warrant immediate action during an active weather emergency. Coleman's facade cracked momentarily, frustration bleeding through. These people are clearly establishing unauthorized occupancy. The bank has concerns about property damage affecting their collateral position. The sheriff removed his hat, revealing close-cropped gray hair that matched the mountain's winter landscape. Bank concerns aren't emergency law enforcement matters, Richard. He turned to Jack. Your generator's down. Fuel line froze, then ran out of diesel, Jack confirmed. We're conserving wood for the stove. Managing for now. Sheriff Donovan nodded, making a decision that clearly disappointed Coleman. I've got an emergency propane heater in my vehicle. Not much, but it'll help until the plows get through. He returned his hat to his head. And I'll radio dispatch to prioritize this location for the county emergency services once the main road is clear. Coleman stepped closer to the sheriff, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper that still carried in the mountain air. Don, we discussed this. The zoning issues alone. The sheriff cut him off with a gesture that carried decades of authority. What we discussed was a routine check on stranded citizens. I'm seeing Americans helping each other survive. That's still legal in my county. He turned back toward his vehicle. I'll get that heater. Coleman remained on the porch, his calculated demeanor slipping further as his plan unraveled. This isn't over, Sullivan. The bank doesn't care about your motorcycle club charity case. Deadline's still deadline. Jack met his gaze without flinching. You might want to worry less about my property and more about what Ms. Blackwood's legal team is discovering about Madison developers' tactics. I hear predatory acquisition strategies are frowned upon by federal regulators. The veiled threat landed with precision. Coleman's eyes darted to Alexandra, who smiled with the confidence of someone who had faced down corporate sharks in boardrooms across the country. I've already submitted preliminary findings to my contacts at the Colorado Attorney General's office. Just routine due diligence for potential investment considerations, of course. Coleman retreated a step, recalculating his position with visible unease. This is still a straightforward foreclosure, Sullivan. Don't complicate it by making unfounded accusations. Alexandra's smile sharpened. Accusations become founded when supported by evidence. Silverwings rides with cameras these days, Mr. Coleman. Every conversation, every interaction documented for safety purposes. She tilted her head slightly. including your visit yesterday and your remarks about engineering financial pressure. The tactical reversal was complete. Coleman had arrived intending to use regulatory authority as a weapon only to discover he had walked into a carefully documented pattern of his own potentially illegal behavior. He retreated toward his Jeep without another word, his body language communicating what his corporate training prevented him from saying aloud. He had been outmaneuvered. Sheriff Donovan returned carrying a small propane heater, seemingly oblivious to the tense exchange that had occurred in his absence. He handed the device to Jack with a nod of professional respect. Not much, but it'll buy you a few more hours. Plows are working from both directions. You'll have road access by afternoon if the weather holds. The sheriff departed with promises to check back once the county emergency teams could safely navigate the mountain. Coleman's Jeep had already disappeared down the snow-covered road, leaving churned tracks that resembled a hasty retreat rather than a strategic withdrawal. Inside, the modest propane heater provided a psychological boost even greater than its actual thermal output. The immediate threat of hypothermia receded, allowing the group to focus on their next challenges. Jack and Alexandra conferred near the radio, which now received clearer transmissions as the storm system finally moved beyond the mountain range. "He's going to escalate," Alexandra observed, keeping her voice low to avoid alarming the others. "Men like Coleman don't retreat, they regroup and attack from another angle." Jack nodded military assessment, aligning with her corporate experience. "But he's rattled, made mistakes, revealed too much about his timeline and priorities. That gives us leverage." Alexandra studied the man beside her. His calm efficiency in crisis, his unflinching confrontation with Coleman, his constant attention to the needs of everyone in his care. In the corporate world, she had encountered countless men who projected strength through aggression and volume. Jack's quieter power was far more authentic and far more effective. The radio crackled again this time, with a transmission from another Silver Wings chapter approaching from the Colorado side. They had coordinated with the Wyoming group and expected to reach the North Star within 3 hours, bringing additional supplies and a portable generator. As if responding to this promise of reinforcements, the weather outside began to shift. The relentless clouds thinned, allowing occasional shafts of sunlight to pierce through and reflect blindingly off the snow-covered landscape. The temperature remained dangerously low, but the clearing skies meant improved visibility for approaching rescue teams. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. Despite the cold and their exhaustion, the Silver Wings organized the lodge to receive the incoming support efficiently. Lily had taken charge of creating a large welcome banner, directing several riders and transforming a bedsheet into a colorful sign with "Thank you, Silver Wings" painted in bold letters. Jack worked methodically to clear snow from the entrance and create a path to the propane tank, which would need refilling once supplies arrived. The physical labor warmed him temporarily, but his fingers and toes had begun to lose sensation, a warning sign he recognized from survival training. Alexandra joined him outside, her breath creating a frozen halo around her face. "You need to warm up. You're pushing too hard." Jack continued shoveling, each movement precisely calibrated to conserve energy while maximizing effectiveness. "Hypothermia is a slow predator. I can feel it coming. Know my limits." Alexandra took the shovel from his hands with gentle firmness. "Leaders need to model self-preservation, not just self-sacrifice." Her eyes held his, a commander recognizing another's blind spot. "Your daughter needs you functional, not heroic." The simple truth penetrated where arguments would have failed. Jack relinquished the shovel, acknowledging her point with a nod. "She knows what it's like to lose one parent. I won't risk leaving her without another." They returned inside, where Maria had organized a system of gentle exercises to keep everyone's blood flowing without overexertion. Lily demonstrated arm circles with exaggerated enthusiasm, her resilience a beacon that sustained adult morale. Jack watched his daughter, marveling at her adaptability, a quality Emily had possessed in abundance. The grief that usually accompanied thoughts of his late wife felt different now, tempered by new connections forming in this crucible of crisis. The distant sound of engines broke through the relative quiet, not one or two, but many growing steadily louder. Jack moved to the window, his heart accelerating at the sight that greeted him. A convoy of vehicles approached from the direction of the main highway: motorcycles, with sidecars modified for snow travel, four-wheel drive trucks with chains, even a small snowplow leading the formation. Alexandra joined him, her composed demeanor cracking slightly as emotion broke through. The Silver Wings cavalry had arrived, and they had brought an army. The next hour transformed the North Star Lodge from a desperate outpost to a hive of focused activity. The first riders through the door carried insulated containers of hot food medical supplies and fuel for both the generator and the propane tanks. Behind them came technical specialists with tools and replacement parts, followed by riders bearing warm clothing blankets and batteries for communications equipment. The reunion between Alexandra and her extended Silver Wings family carried the intensity of warriors who had feared for their comrades. Hugs were fierce but brief, immediately followed by status reports and coordinated assistance. Jack observed this seamless operation with professional appreciation. These women functioned with military precision despite their civilian status. A tall woman with a gray-streaked braid and the bearing of a career officer approached Jack directly. "You must be Sullivan? I'm Karen Mitchell Laramie Chapter. Army Corps of Engineers, retired." She offered a firm handshake. "Got your generator situation described to me. Should have you back up and running within the hour." The technical team immediately set to work diagnosing the generator issues and replacing frozen components with winterized alternatives. Another group established a temporary heating system using propane heaters placed strategically throughout the lodge. Medical personnel checked each person for signs of hypothermia or frostbite, paying special attention to the most vulnerable. Jack found himself momentarily displaced in his own establishment, no longer the primary caretaker, but instead one of the recipients of this wave of coordinated support. The sensation was unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, until he spotted Lily moving happily among the new arrivals, proudly showing her drawings and introducing her Silver Wings to the newcomers. His daughter's joy provided permission to accept this unexpected community that had materialized around them. Alexandra coordinated the information exchange, gathering intelligence from the new arrivals while updating them on the situation with Coleman and Madison developers. A woman in her 40s with a lawyer's attentive expression took copious notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about dates, specific statements, and documentation. "We've got enough for a restraining order at a minimum," the legal advisor concluded. "Possibly enough to trigger a regulatory review of their entire development project." Her eyes gleamed with the anticipation of a righteous fight. Nothing corporate developers hate more than sunshine on their backroom deals. Another writer introduced as their financial specialist outlined the resources that had been assembled to address the immediate foreclosure threat. The Silver Wings network had mobilized impressive support, a combination of emergency loans, direct contributions, and skilled volunteers willing to help rehabilitate the property to increase its revenue potential. The numbers they presented left Jack momentarily speechless. The combined pledges exceeded his outstanding debt by a significant margin, with additional resources earmarked for critical infrastructure improvements. What had seemed an insurmountable financial crisis just days ago now appeared solvable, challenging, still but within the realm of possibility. By late afternoon, the North Star Lodge had undergone a remarkable transformation. The generator hummed with renewed purpose, heat flowed from multiple sources, and the main room bustled with over 40 people engaged in various aspects of the recovery effort. Maps were spread across tables, showing the locations of additional Silver Wings chapters mobilizing support. A makeshift communications center had been established coordinating activities across multiple states. Jack found Alexandra near the window, momentarily separate from the organized chaos, as she watched additional vehicles arriving through the now cleared road. The steel in her spine remained, but her features had softened with the relief of successful reinforcements. "I never expected this scale of response," Jack admitted, joining her at the window. "This is beyond anything I could have imagined." Alexandra's gaze remained on the approaching vehicles. Silver Wings was built for exactly this purpose, mobilizing quickly to help those who deserve support but find themselves isolated. Her eyes shifted to meet his. Usually it's women escaping dangerous situations or veterans facing systemic barriers. But the principle remains the same: no one should have to fight alone when they've already proven their courage. The simple eloquence of her statement resonated with Jack's Marine ethos more deeply than elaborate speeches ever could. Before he could respond, Karen approached with news that demanded immediate attention. "County Plow just radioed. They've cleared to the main junction, but they've also got news. Coleman's at the bank in town right now trying to push through emergency foreclosure proceedings based on unauthorized commercial activity and property endangerment." Karen's expression was grim but determined. "He's making his move while he thinks we're still isolated and disorganized." Alexander's response was immediate. "Get the legal team on the phone with our banking contacts, then prepare the documentation package we assembled." She turned to Jack. "We need to send representatives into town immediately." show the bank physical evidence of Coleman's tactics and our counter-documentation. The situation had escalated to its critical phase. Coleman, recognizing the threat posed by the Silver Wings mobilization, had advanced his timeline, attempting to secure legal control of the property before their counteroffensive could be fully deployed. It was a desperate gambit, but potentially effective if executed before they could respond. "I should go," Jack stated, already reaching for his jacket. "It's my property, my fight." Alexandra placed a hand on his arm, her grip gentle but insistent. "You're needed here with Lily with the recovery operation." She nodded toward three women already preparing to depart. "Our legal team has handled dozens of these situations. They know exactly how to present the evidence for maximum impact." Plus, she allowed a small, fierce smile. "Coleman won't be expecting them instead of you. That gives us a tactical advantage." The military reasoning penetrated Jack's protective instinct. He nodded, accepting the strategic wisdom while still struggling with the sensation of entrusting this crucial battle to others. His entire adult life had been defined by personal responsibility as a Marine, as a husband, as a father, as a business owner. Delegation of something this essential challenged his core identity. Alexandra recognized this internal conflict with uncanny accuracy. "Trust runs both ways, Marine. You trusted us with shelter when we needed it most. Now trust us with this," her voice lowered, intended for him alone. "The bravest thing a leader does sometimes is let others fight while he secures the base." The legal team departed with comprehensive documentation and real-time communication links to both Alexandra and their network of financial experts. The North Star fell into a tense waiting pattern, continuing recovery operations while awaiting news from the confrontation happening miles away in the town's small bank building. Lily, sensing the undercurrent of adult concern, despite efforts to shield her, sought out her father with unusually direct questions. "Are we going to lose our home?" Her small face carried the serious expression of a child who had already experienced profound loss once and recognized its approaching shadow. Jack knelt to her level, choosing honesty, tempered with appropriate reassurance. "We're facing a tough fight, sweetheart, but we're not fighting alone anymore." He gestured to the Silver Wings members working throughout the lodge. "Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. That doesn't make it any less real." Lily considered this with the solemn contemplation only children can truly master. "Like when Mom got sick and all the neighbors brought food and helped with me." The simple parallel caught Jack, unprepared, emotion tightening his throat momentarily. "Exactly like that. Community matters. Your mom always knew that better than I did." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this framework for understanding their current circumstances. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded paper, carefully smoothing it open to reveal a new drawing, this one showing the North Star surrounded by motorcycles with stick figures holding hands in a protective circle around the building. "I made this for Ms. Alexandra. Do you think she'll like it?" Jack studied the artwork, recognizing in his daughter's simple lines a profound truth about their situation that many adults would miss. "She'll treasure it, Lily, because you've captured exactly what's happening here better than any of us could explain it." Across the room, the radio crackled with an incoming transmission from the legal team. Alexandra moved swiftly to receive it, her posture alert as she listened to the report. Her expression shifted from concentration to surprise, then to carefully controlled satisfaction. She gestured for Jack to join her as the transmission continued. The confrontation at the bank had unfolded in unexpected ways. Coleman had indeed attempted to expedite the foreclosure process, citing regulatory violations and property misuse as justification. What he hadn't anticipated was the bank's regional manager being present, the same manager who had a brother-in-law deeply involved with the veterans' support organizations, including Silver Wings. The legal team had presented not only documentation of Coleman's potentially illegal pressure tactics, but also a comprehensive financial package demonstrating the North Star's viability with proper support. More critically, they had revealed Madison developers' pattern of similar actions against other property owners along the proposed resort corridor, information that transformed the narrative from an isolated foreclosure to a systematic corporate predation strategy. The bank manager's decision had been swift and unequivocal. Foreclosure proceedings were suspended pending full review, with a 30-day extension automatically granted to allow proper consideration of all financial options. Coleman's protest had been cut short by the manager's pointed question about whether Madison developers would prefer to address these issues in a private banking review or a more public regulatory investigation. As Alexandra relayed this information to the assembled group, a cheer erupted that seemed to shake snow from the eaves outside. The immediate threat had been neutralized. They had secured precious time, not complete victory, but a critical defensive position from which to launch their counter-strategy. The celebration that followed carried the infectious energy of warriors who had faced annihilation and found reprieve. Food was shared, stories exchanged, and bonds strengthened between people who had been strangers just days before. The Silver Wings contingent had grown to nearly 50 members, with reports of additional supporters establishing supply chains and communication networks throughout the region. As evening approached, Jack found himself momentarily alone on the porch, watching the sunset paint the snow-covered mountains in shades of amber and gold. The temperature remained bitterly cold, but with the restored heating systems, proper supplies, and reinforced community, the bite of winter had lost its threat. Alexandra joined him, offering a steaming mug of coffee, real coffee, not the rationed brew they had subsisted on during the crisis. They stood in companionable silence for several minutes, each processing the dramatic reversal of circumstances in their own way. "It's not over," Jack observed, finally his tactical mind already looking beyond the immediate victory. "Coleman and Madison won't abandon their plans because of one setback." Alexandra nodded, her breath creating crystalline clouds in the frigid air. This was just the first engagement. They'll regroup, try different angles, look for new vulnerabilities. That's how corporate predators operate. But she turned slightly to face him. They've lost the element of surprise, and they've severely underestimated their opposition. Jack surveyed the collection of vehicles now surrounding the North Star motorcycles, trucks, and SUVs bearing license plates from 6 different states. The impromptu community that had formed inside represented something powerful, something Coleman's financial algorithms and corporate strategies had failed to account for in their calculations. What happens when those roads fully clear? Jack asked the question that had begun to form in his mind as the immediate crisis abated. When the emergency ends and normal life resumes, Alexandra sipped her coffee, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Some riders will depart, others will arrive. The network remains active until the situation stabilizes completely. Her gray eyes met his directly. "Silver Wings doesn't abandon missions halfway, Sullivan. That's not how we operate." Before either could address the deeper implications of this statement, Lily burst through the door, her excitement palpable. "Daddy, Ms. Karen fixed the big radio and now there's music. Come listen, everyone's dancing." The child's joy provided perfect cover for postponing more complex conversations. Jack allowed himself to be pulled back inside, where indeed the atmosphere had transformed from tactical operation to impromptu celebration. Someone had connected a music player to the lodge's ancient speaker system, filling the space with classic rock that several riders were enthusiastically dancing to while continuing their recovery work. The scene struck Jack with unexpected emotional force, the North Star vibrant with life and laughter in a way it hadn't been since Emily's passing. For years, he had maintained the lodge as a business and shelter, but had forgotten its original purpose as a gathering place for community. Watching Silver Wings members teaching Lily dance moves, while simultaneously organizing supply inventories, he glimpsed a version of his establishment he had never fully realized, one filled with purpose beyond mere survival. 3 days later, as the mountain roads cleared completely and supply chains were restored, the immediate crisis had fully abated. Teams of riders with specialized skills had tackled critical repairs that Jack had been forced to postpone due to financial constraints. The leaking roof was properly sealed, electrical systems upgraded, and plumbing issues addressed with professional efficiency. Others had focused on enhancing the lodge's commercial potential, developing marketing strategies, targeting the motorcycle community as a specialized niche that complemented the existing hunter and outdoor enthusiast clientele. The evening was winding down after another day of intense activity. Many riders had departed for their homes or moved on to other chapters, but a core group remained committed to seeing the North Star's transformation through to completion. Jack found Alexandra on the newly cleared deck, watching as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear in the crystal-clear mountain night. "Have you given any thought to what happens next?" she asked without preamble. "Your bank extension is good for 30 days. Madison Developers isn't going away. They need this property too badly to surrender after one defeat." "I've been thinking about it nonstop," Jack admitted. "The financial package your team assembled is solid. I can clear the debt and have enough for critical upgrades. But long-term sustainability is trickier. Winter seasons are harsh up here. We need a steadier revenue stream." Alexandra leaned against the railing, her profile outlined against the darkening sky. What if the North Star became something new? An official waypoint on the Silver Wings network, a designated safe haven and resupply point for motorcycle groups across the Rockies. We have chapters crisscrossing these mountains from spring through fall. Having a permanent veteran-run base would be invaluable. Jack considered the proposal, seeing both opportunity and challenge. This place has always been for travelers, a refuge from the road. But can motorcycle traffic alone sustain it through the seasons? Not alone. Alexandra turned to face him fully. But combined with your existing clientele of hunters and outdoor enthusiasts, plus expanded winter services for emergency crews and maintenance teams. She offered a rare, genuine smile. I've run the numbers, Sullivan. It works, especially with regular Silver Wings events and rally points. Their conversation was interrupted by the distinctive sound of engines approaching. Not motorcycles, but the now familiar rumble of Coleman's Jeep Cherokee, followed by several black SUVs with tinted windows. Jack's posture shifted instantly to alert readiness. Looks like Coleman brought reinforcements this time, Alexandra observed, already moving toward the door to alert the others. Security team by the looks of those vehicles. Jack's jaw tightened. He's escalating, trying to intimidate through show of force. Within minutes, the Silver Wings security team had mobilized, taking defensive positions throughout the lodge. Lily was moved to a safe location with Maria, while others prepared to document whatever confrontation might unfold. Jack stepped onto the porch, deliberately positioning himself in the headlights' glare to demonstrate his refusal to be intimidated. Alexandra and Karen flanked him with several other Silver Wings members, establishing a second line just inside the doorway. Coleman approached, flanked by 4 men whose bearing and positioning screamed professional security. They wore unmarked black parkas and moved with the coordinated precision of those accustomed to physical intimidation. "This charade ends now," Sullivan Coleman stated flatly, his corporate veneer completely replaced by raw frustration. He gestured to the lodge and the vehicles surrounding it. "You've turned a simple business transaction into a circus. My patience is exhausted." Jack remained motionless, his marine stillness contrasting with Coleman's agitated movements. "Your bank didn't seem to consider it a simple transaction once they had all the facts. Perhaps you should reconsider your approach." Coleman stepped closer, lowering his voice, though the intensity increased. "Madison Developers has invested millions in this development corridor. We have commitments to investors, to the County Economic Development Board." His gaze flicked to Alexandra and back. "Do you really think your motorcycle club charity case changes anything? I can outlast whatever temporary funding they have arranged." Alexandra's voice cut it through the night air with precision. "Madison's funding structure is leveraged against land acquisition completion by third quarter. Your investors in Chicago and Dubai are already nervous about the delays." Her smile contained zero warmth. "Did I mention I sit on an investment board with your primary financier? Amazing what comes up in casual conversation." The calculated revelation landed visibly, Coleman's confident posture faltering momentarily. The security contractors exchanged glances, sensing the shift in power dynamics. "This property will be part of Blue Ridge Resort one way or another," Coleman stated flatly. "The economics are inevitable. All you're doing is delaying while driving up costs for everyone." Jack studied Coleman with the careful assessment of someone who had evaluated enemy combatants in multiple conflict zones. He recognized the desperation beneath the bluster, a man whose professional reputation and financial future were increasingly tied to a specific outcome that was slipping from his control. "There's always another way," Jack replied, his voice calm but carrying. "One that respects what's already here instead of destroying it. One that builds community instead of displacing it." Coleman laughed, the sound harsh in the cold mountain air. "Community, this failing bar in the middle of nowhere." His gesture encompassed the North Star with dismissive contempt. "Don't overestimate your importance, Sullivan. You're a rounding error in the economic projections." From the doorway behind them came a small voice, clear and unexpected. "This is our home." Lily had appeared between 2 Silver Wings members, her expression solemn as she surveyed the confrontation. "And these are our friends." The simple declaration from a child shifted the emotional temperature instantly. Coleman's security team looked distinctly uncomfortable, their professional detachment compromised by the presence of an 8-year-old defending her home against grown men in the night. Coleman recognized the public relations disaster unfolding and retreated a step, recalibrating his approach. "My dispute isn't with you, young lady. Business matters are complicated. Sometimes change is necessary for progress." Lily regarded him with the unfiltered assessment only children can truly deliver. "My dad says progress that hurts people isn't really progress. It's just greed wearing a nicer coat." The devastating simplicity of her statement hung in the air, impossible to counter, without appearing morally bankrupt. Coleman's face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and anger. He gestured sharply to his security team, who began retreating to their vehicles without requiring explicit instructions. "This isn't over," Sullivan Coleman stated, the threat in his voice undermined by his tactical retreat. "The economics don't change because you've got temporary support." Jack remained motionless until Coleman had returned to his vehicle, the small convoy reversing course down the mountain road with less coordination than their arrival had displayed. Only when the last taillights disappeared around the bend did he turn to find Lily and lift her into a protective embrace. "Sorry, Daddy. I know I am supposed to stay inside when there's trouble, but I heard that man being mean about our home." Jack held his daughter close, pride overwhelming any impulse to reprimand her for the rule violation. "You spoke the truth, Lily, just like your mom always taught you to do." His voice softened further. "She would have been so proud of you tonight." The confrontation had been brief but significant. Coleman's attempt to intimidate through show of force had backfired dramatically, undermining his position while strengthening the bonds between the North Star and its defenders. Over the following weeks, the transformation of the North Star accelerated. The Silver Wings network continued to provide resources, expertise, and a steady stream of visitors that helped establish the lodge's new identity. Legal pressure mounted against Madison developers as evidence of their predatory practices was submitted to regulatory authorities. Coleman himself was eventually removed from the project after investors grew concerned about negative publicity and potential investigations. The foreclosure was not only halted, but resolved entirely when the Silver Wings financial package was formally accepted by the bank. The debt was cleared, critical infrastructure improvements were completed, and a sustainable business model was established that protected the North Star's independence while integrating it into the broader motorcycle community network. 6 months later, spring sunlight spilled across the newly expanded deck of what had once been the North Star Lodge. The freshly painted sign above the entrance now read "Steel Refuge" in bold lettering with smaller text beneath, "Where all roads lead home." The parking area had been expanded and professionally graded, accommodating both cars and a substantial number of motorcycles arranged in neat rows. Weekend visitors filled the main room, a diverse mixture of motorcyclists, hikers, taking advantage of the mountain trails, and locals who had discovered the establishment's excellent food and welcoming atmosphere. The interior had been tastefully renovated, maintaining its rustic character while adding modern amenities and subtle motorcycle-themed decorative elements that made it a distinctive destination on popular riding routes. Jack Sullivan moved through the crowded space with the relaxed confidence of someone who had found his purpose anew. He stopped to chat with customers, checked in with the small but efficient staff he'd been able to hire, and occasionally glanced at the framed photographs now decorating the walls, images documenting the remarkable transformation that had begun during a desperate blizzard. Lily darted between tables, now comfortable in her role as the unofficial junior ambassador of Steel Refuge. Under Maria's tutelage, who had decided to stay on as a permanent fixture at the lodge, her artistic talents had developed remarkably, and her drawings, professionally framed, had become a distinctive feature of the establishment's decor. The rumble of a familiar motorcycle engine announced a much-anticipated arrival. Jack moved to the entrance, his heart lightening at the sight of Alexandra dismounting her bike. Her visits had become more frequent over the months, each stay a little longer than the last, as her connection to both the Steel Refuge and its owner deepened beyond professional alliance. "How's Seattle surviving without you?" Jack asked the question, carrying their private joke about her increasingly extended absences from Blackwood Tech's headquarters. Alexandra's smile reached her eyes, a transformation Jack had watched unfold gradually over their months of collaboration. "The executive team is discovering they can function without my physical presence for more than 48 hours. Revolutionary concept in corporate America." As they moved to what had become their usual table overlooking both the interior and the mountain views beyond, Jack felt the weight of a decision he'd been considering for weeks. Before he could speak, Alexandra placed a folder on the table between them. "The board approved it yesterday," she said without preamble. "Rocky Mountain Regional Office. Blackwood Tech will establish a permanent presence in Colorado, focused on outdoor security systems and emergency communications technology." Her eyes met his, steady and certain. "I'll need to be here at least half-time to oversee it." The implication hung between them another step in the gradual convergence of their separate worlds. Jack considered her words, understanding both what was said and what remained unspoken. Steel Refuge could probably accommodate a tech executive in residence, he replied with characteristic directness. His eyes held hers with steady certainty, if she were planning to stay a while. Alexandra's smile deepened professional reserve, giving way to genuine warmth. I hear the owner appreciates those who understand the value of community, especially if they're willing to contribute to building something meaningful together. Lily appeared at their table carrying a new drawing. This one showing the Steel Refuge surrounded by spring flowers and motorcycles beneath a bright sun. I made this for your office in Seattle, she announced, presenting her artwork with solemn ceremony. So you remember us when you're there. Alexandra accepted the gift with equal seriousness, though her eyes softened as she studied the detailed rendering. It's beautiful, Lily, though I think I'll be remembering this place more and more frequently, even without reminders. As spring sunlight lengthened toward evening, casting golden light across the mountains and valleys surrounding the Steel Refuge, Jack surveyed what had once seemed impossible, not just the survival of his business, but its transformation into something vibrant and meaningful that honored both Emily's memory and the future he wanted for Lily. What had begun as 20 strangers seeking shelter from a blizzard had evolved into a community, a purpose, and perhaps even the beginning of a new chapter in his personal life. The storm that had once threatened everything had instead cleared the way for possibilities neither he nor Alexandra could have imagined on that desperate winter night when she had first knocked on his door. Outside, the first Silver Wings riders of the evening were arriving, their engines announcing the continuation of a tradition that would likely outlast all of them. A circle of support, a promise of shelter, a reminder that even in the coldest winter, unexpected warmth could be found when doors opened instead of closed.